morning, everyone. It's Monday, November 7 here in Manila. I'm Davila giving you the head start for the day. Our guest for Hot Copy today. Is it time for the Philippines to consider nuclear energy? What's the importance of the Paris Climate Change Agreement? We have with us, straight from Switzerland, nuclear energy expert, eco-modernist Urs Bolt. He's with us this morning in an exclusive live interview. What's the energy situation in the country, and will nuclear energy give the Philippines what it needs? Joining us on Hot Copy this morning to discuss the impact of the Paris Agreement on climate change, the energy situation in the country, is nuclear energy expert Urs Bolt, straight from Switzerland. Thank you for coming to the show, Urs.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you to have me here. I'm really pleased to hopefully have an interesting talk with you this morning.
All right, let's start first with the Paris Climate Change Agreement. It started on November 4. The Philippines has not ratified it. How important is it that the Philippines ratifies that?
I believe it's important as a more than a symbol than really having an impact yet, because when I look at the energy situation in the Philippines, you have very low energy consumption, still far to go to achieve levels even of your neighboring countries. But I think it's very important that ratifying it means you're also serious into it, and you will be part of this global partnership to agree on it. Yeah.
Now, one of the challenges in ratifying that agreement is, in the agreement, the Philippines will have to cut fossil fuel by, I think, 70% come, I think, a certain period in time, I think 2030 or something like that. And given that the Philippines has the highest electricity rates, I think in the region, I'm not sure if in the world, but definitely in the region, I mean, you have experts saying we are not ready to stop using coal. You know what I mean? Coal being the cheapest. Is there another alternative to coal?
Right now there are alternatives, of course. There are several. The ones we always hear are the renewable energy. You already use a big part of it in geothermal, the second largest geothermal generation or generator in the world, actually.
But then it's more expensive per kilowatt hour, at least here.
At least might be, but I think you make use of it. At least that's something which not many countries can do. Then you have hydropower, especially in Mindanao, in the southern region, like 50% of the power mix. But when it comes to the north, where you have like 80% of the power generation and consumption, then you have obviously more than 80% fossil fuel for electricity production. So the challenge will now be, how fast can you actually replace coal and to still provide clean and cheap energy for the people with an extremely fast rising demand.
So what would be the best alternative to coal that would be cheap, that would be environmentally safe?
Okay, then we go into the topic. In our view, as I'm representing Energy for Humanity, and as you can see on this chart, it's the number one problem we have in the world for humanity is energy. And then we have water and food, and all the others come later. So if you want to have people prospering, then you need a lot of cheap and clean energy.
So we have that on graphics right now. We're showing it on screen. So you're saying, okay, go ahead, continue.
We need to look at all the available options to actually provide enough and increasingly more energy here in the Philippines, which is clean and hopefully becoming cheaper in the future, because, as you say, the energy prices here are extremely high. They're second after Hong Kong, I believe, or Japan, maybe third right now. You improved the situation a bit in the last 2 years, I believe, but they are comparable with the electricity prices in France. Now you compare France with the Philippines, you know what I mean. I mean, the buying power there much higher. Now, just talking about France, France has 90% or more than 90% clean electricity generation.
Really?
Why is that? Because they have nuclear power.
Are you serious? So you're telling me France is 90% clean power because it is nuclear?
Absolutely.
Okay, go ahead.
So they have hydropower, which they use as a pump storage as well. They have the mountains.
So there's no fossil fuel in France?
They have almost no fossil fuels for electricity production.
Amazing.
So it's basically meaningless.
Yes, yes.
The whole point is that France was able, within 15 years, to actually increase the share of nuclear power to clean electricity production within 15 years to 80%. So 80% is nuclear power.
Would nuclear power be the best option for the Philippines?
Mid-long term it will be, in my view, because of you have a 100 million country, you have limited additional hydropower available, and you have geothermal already used quite a lot. When you want to use that more, it will become extremely expensive, I believe.
Yeah.
So I would say it will need to be a mix. There will probably also be a place for solar power and wind power, especially in the north where you have a windy region. Then you have to consider the transmission grid, how to transport energy down to the south, and I would assume it's probably best to use the wind energy in the north.
Okay, all right, let's show the next graphics that we have right now so that we have an understanding, I think, of the power mix in the Philippines and where nuclear would fit right in. Okay, so clearly you're saying the advantages of nuclear far outweigh the fears of people.
I would say in general with risk, the perception is not aligned with science or with facts.
Yeah.
That's in general. We all know that when we sit in a car, to get from home to the airport by car is actually more dangerous than to sit in the plane.
Okay, all right. Explain this graphics. You have the Philippines right there, and you have Japan at #1. You mean, okay, that's
so this graph shows actually the electricity generation per capita, per person in the Philippines. So you see that the Philippines, with not even 800 kilowatt hours per capita, is actually below even India, which was actually shocking to me when I started to deep dive into the facts of the electricity situation here in the Philippines. And Vietnam, after leaving the communism 20 years ago, actually has more than double the generation. That means...
So what we're saying is Vietnam, which is a much smaller country than the Philippines, I mean in terms of population, is generating more power for the country than the Philippines is.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So I would assume that because of the strong growth rates in the economy you have now, your electricity demand and energy demand in general will massively increase now, and you will need to provide and always to cope with the shortfalls you have. And I think right now it's okay. I never really had a brownout experience so far here, but going forward you need to continuously add more power, and that's the big challenge. How fast can you add this big amount of power to the grid?
Okay, more power plants are coming into the Philippines. When President Aquino left, I think he signed 25 power plants, most of them coal.
Yes.
So that's the interesting part. Do you see it as a good sign that although the Philippines is trying to make up for its power needs, a bulk of it is in coal?
Yeah, that's the fastest and quickest you can obviously do. Obviously,
and cheapest.
You have some gas power as well. You have some fields out in the sea. These might be depleted by mid-20s, and how to replace that is the question. Do you have more resources available? I don't know. Gas is much cleaner than coal. Coal is also imported, so it's volatile, depending on the markets, of course. But coal is the fastest to build. The question is, overall, the question is, do you want clean or cheap energy? For the short term, it's clean or cheap. And if you have
the long term,
it needs to be both clean and cheap.
And that would be nuclear.
That's, in my view, will be nuclear.
Okay.
And I have the facts here to show.
Yes. All right. What are the advantages? Let's start with nuclear energy, environmentally speaking.
Yeah. First of all, maybe I can show you this little stick here. This is not thorium, but I wanted to show you a thorium stick, and it's like, that's the energy for a 4-person household which you need for a year with a modern 4th generation molten salt reactor.
Okay.
Now then I have this bottle here with a dirty drink in it. Just
With
to
soda.
exemplify, with soda.
Carbonated
exactly.
drink. Okay.
Carbonated drink. So if that would be the coal volume, this would actually just be enough for, you need 20 bottles per day of Coke in this volume compared to this for a year. So add this up, you will have more than 7,000 bottles which you need to actually feed in to burn the coal and to generate electricity.
I see.
So this is actually called energy density.
Yeah.
And that's a very important thing to understand in the current discussion. We actually rarely discuss this. When you look at it, when you want to have minimal impact on the environment and for the climate, you actually need energy dense technology, especially in extremely urban areas like here in Manila.
Yeah. And nuclear would be extremely dense.
It would be extremely dense, or also current technology is already extremely dense. It has a minimal impact. Also regarding the waste maybe, you have this little matchbox here. That's the matchbox which with current technology would actually just produce the high level radioactive waste of one person for 60 years.
With nuclear?
I can't even give you an example how much you produce with coal. This is the minuscule waste you produce, high-level waste, in 60 years of electricity production, consumption of nuclear power, of current technology. Now, if you use this one here, with this for 1 year, this little welding rod, which would be thoriated in real life, then that would actually be by magnitudes lower. It would be like a fingertip.
Yeah. Okay. Now, when you mention nuclear energy, I mean, many Filipinos would say Fukushima. And then, you know, nuclear is out of the question.
Okay, Fukushima is obviously was an accident. It was a meltdown of reactors. It was caused by the earthquake. The tsunami flooded the plant.
Okay.
And then obviously the backup diesel generators couldn't cope with it. They were flooded, so they couldn't cool down anymore. Now, fact is, in Fukushima, no one died of radiation. And this was the wake-up call for many environmentalists, and I know hundreds of them by now, which changed their mind and became pro-nuclear. They say, if you want to cope with environmental issues and the energy challenge we have in the world, not just here, but in many other countries, and you want to protect the climate, you need nuclear as a mix. Even the International Panel of Climate Change is very clear in that sense. They say nuclear has to play a part, can play a part. It always depends on the specific situation per country.
All right, have you visited the Bataan nuclear power plant?
Unfortunately, I wasn't able yet to get there, but I will be back end of January and I will certainly visit it.
Okay, the reason I'm asking you this is the Bataan nuclear power plant, which the Filipino people have been paying for so long, but I think the Filipino people have finished paying for it, but it's a white elephant. It's never been used. I think it's been there more than 30 years. Can it still be used today?
It could certainly still be used.
Really?
There's an example in Wattsbar in the States where they actually also had a long delay, decades, and they went live this summer. So it is possible. It is a technology which is proven. It has a very good track record. It's a pressurized water reactor, by the way, for those who are following the reactor technologies. And it could go online, obviously, with just adding now the last final bits. The question is, do you want this technology now, or you want to go for newer technologies, let's say third generation? This is second generation.
I see.
And
the BMPP.
the BMPP
is second generation.
And it's basically almost finished, but it never went online.
Yeah. So the third generation would be cheaper than running the second.
It should be cheaper, especially given now the scale which some countries like South Korea, China, and also Russia have in building new reactors so fast.
Okay, there's well, at least fear here in the Philippines when it comes to nuclear energy, but there are 440 nuclear reactors all over the world.
That's correct.
And I'm correct?
Yes.
And what are the accident rates of the 440?
The accident rate is, I would say, across all industries, including chemical plants, whatever you look at, is absolutely phenomenal.
None.
There's basically in the whole West, with the exclusion of Russia, which is obviously not counted to the West,
Yeah.
zero death from radiation, from civil use of nuclear energy.
Okay.
In 60 years.
So nuclear energy have advantages of its low pollution.
Low pollution.
What are the greenhouse gas emissions from nuclear?
The greenhouse gas emissions are comparable with solar.
Oh, really?
With solar energy. It's about
in
the
the
same.
level
Or
of
actually,
solar.
sorry to say, it's actually lower. It's actually about
Then
onshore wind. Onshore wind.
Really? Okay. And then, of course, operating costs are low.
I have a chart on this
Okay.
here on the CO2 emissions. And you see actually that solar PV is like 10 times higher. It's
All right.
very low, all of them, of the renewables, including nuclear, which I would call, these are all clean energy technologies down here. And you see nuclear is very bottom. And these are credible sources for nuclear, includes everything from building, production, until to decommission the whole plant.
Okay. Now, President Duterte has said that we may not see nuclear energy during his term. Of course, he wants a lot of studies. He wants it carefully planned. He's, of course, cautious about disasters. Do you think he's well informed?
I think it's very important, as he said, you need to study it well. You need to understand all the facts. I think we can do some more there. I would say,
although
I hope
the
my talk this morning will help.
Open.
The Energy Secretary in
Kusi.
September, when he was in Bataan and I heard the press conference, he was open to it and he was absolutely right. Nuclear energy in the Philippines will be the cheapest source of energy. It's very clear in a deregulated market with basically no subsidies. Then nuclear energy, because of its high power density, including all the security measures, it make it costly to build it. But once it's built, the maintenance is very low. Also, the resource you need, because of the power density, the energy density, need only very small amounts of resource of uranium or thorium in the future, hopefully. Then that's actually the big. That makes you energy independent. So I would say mid-long term, what I feel is the Philippines, like other countries in the region, like Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, even Bangladesh, and others, they all go for nuclear energy now. They build now the programs with help from several countries.
Yeah. Would you consider it to be more reliable and more proficient than fossil fuel?
It actually has a higher capacity factor. That always depends, obviously, on how you maintain it, but usually it should be up to 90%.
Yeah. And you would put nuclear under renewables?
I would put it, renewable is a term which we could discuss.
Yeah.
There's actually no such thing than renewable, because you always, the sun will, in billions of years, also basically not exist anymore. But let's call it clean tech.
Okay.
Because also nuclear, you could actually add it to renewables, because if you can extract the uranium out of the seawater, then you have endless resource. Same for thorium. Thorium is 3 to 4 times more abundant than uranium.
And this would be thorium?
This is just exemplary, because in
thorium.
Switzerland I couldn't get a thorium rod. It's basically a tungsten thoriated welding rod about this size.
Okay.
With a very small diameter, and this is very energy dense.
All right. Now, the concerns when it comes to nuclear energy, the environmental impact. All right. Questions are the process of mining and refining uranium hasn't been clean.
Okay, so again, mining for uranium is of course something you look at, but in my view, the way they do it now, I'm not an expert into that mining part, but it's actually very clean and state of the art. Now, compared to coal, as you see, the amount of resource you need is so small that this is actually adding to the very good and low CO2 emissions, because you only need this small amount of resource. So for me, the mining part, of course, it needs to be considered, is important as it is, but don't forget, for solar and wind, you also have mining operations.
You do?
And you actually need a lot of coal power to produce solar panels. That's always forgotten, especially in the Western countries.
You need a lot of coal?
You need
to
a lot of coal
solar panels?
Exactly. You need
to produce the panel.
That's true. How else do you want to
Yeah.
run the chemical processes?
Yeah.
You need heat.
Yeah.
Heat comes from coal today. But there's a reason why China is also exploring high temperature nuclear reactors.
Yeah.
Because they can produce process heat in a clean way.
Okay, now when it comes to radioactive waste disposal, this is a concern for some.
Yes, it is a concern and it should be a concern, but I haven't seen any other waste which is so properly contained like nuclear waste. It's
But-
always controlled,
Okay.
so the radioactivity can't go away. So if you replace fuel, burnt, it's called used fuel or burnt used fuel in the reactor, in this fuel pellet, then you actually take it out and you put it into a pool of water to cool it down.
But Urs, what do you do, for example, they say as a rule, a nuclear power plant will create 20 metric tons of nuclear fuel per year. Okay, so that's a lot of nuclear waste. What do you do with that?
Now, if you compare that to coal, which then mostly evaporates, or not even evaporating would be nice, but it
Yeah.
goes out into the air.
Yeah.
That's minuscule because it's a very dense
Yeah.
material.
Meaning it's
so
controlled.
It's very controlled, it's very dense. 20 metric tons is not a big, it's the size of a house, you know, of a big house, not more than that.
Yeah, a year.
And that's not the problem. You can actually store that and it's controlled.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
it's not radiating.
All right.
So-
Okay, we'll continue our conversation after this short break. Hot Copy, we'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching Headstart. Still with us on Hot Copy. The second half of Hot Copy. Is the Philippines ready for nuclear energy, or should the Philippines already consider nuclear energy? Nuclear energy expert Urs Bolt is with us this morning. You were going to show us, change the perception of what nuclear plants already look like today.
That's exactly what Energy for Humanity wants to help people to grapple with.
Okay.
Now, you have one picture here which shows, what do you believe that is, Karen?
At first look, you'd think it's a museum.
Exactly, it looks like auditorium, like a museum. That's an architectural sketch of a modern new nuclear power plant in its fourth generation. So this plant, which is underneath, is now being research developed. They are in a third stage now of their 7 steps or 8 steps developing, and that's actually how you can.
And where is this?
This is now in the States.
In the US?
This is a
Oh.
startup which works from MIT engineers.
Yeah.
And I was allowed to show this today. And this would basically be how to cover the nuclear power plant. Below is a very modern, future-proof technology, which will also actually recycle the waste we have today. So
I
all
see.
these metric tons, which we have per year, actually the 20 metric tons per year, they're actually just a large American size, US size refrigerator. It's actually smaller. I
Yeah.
just was able to look that
Yeah.
up during the break. Now this modern nuclear power plants, they are meltdown proof. They can actually be next to Manila in an
Really?
area. So they
Yeah.
have actually very short transmission grids. They can be smaller. They can be sort of not exactly. This one would be like medium sized,
Yeah,
3 to 500 megawatt.
But
like,
both this still produce a lot of low-level radioactive waste
the low,
that's transmitted in parts and supplies.
No, actually, this would be even more energy efficient than the ones we have today. So actually, the current technology we have today uses only 4% of the fuel you give in. So 96% is actually taken out.
Okay.
But why is radioactive today is because it's still full of
Yeah.
energy. The new reactor technology will use up to 98%.
Now, Urs, what about, let's face it, nuclear accidents recently in Asia, you have Fukushima, but no one would ever forget Chernobyl.
Of course, Chernobyl should never be forgotten, of course. No.
But you see, what guarantees, us that something of that magnitude will not happen again?
That's quite simple one. The reactor type in Chernobyl, that had not even a containment, so it wasn't even able to contain the radioactive fallout from the meltdown. So
would that be first generation?
It was a first generation without containment. These do not exist anymore. That's already 30 years ago now.
Okay.
So there is no, we don't need Chernobyl to use as a gimme pick or example that it could happen again.
Yeah.
Because it's simply not existent.
Yeah.
Now then the other one which would be more comparable is maybe 3 Mile Island, which happened in 79 with a pressurized water reactor in the United States. So that was a partial meltdown, but it actually didn't, there was no fallout from the radioactivity. So it actually was contained in the containment building. And that's what I would expect if something would happen, that it would be like this. Now Fukushima, obviously, and that had, like Chernobyl, a design error. The problem was that the wall, which should actually hold back the water, wasn't high enough. And then it was flooded, and then the backup diesel generators didn't have filter systems which avoided the water to come in. So they went down. Now 10 miles north of Fukushima, you have similar power plants, and they didn't have this issue. They had high enough volts, they had the backup, they were able to control it, to run down the reactors in a controlled way.
Okay, all right. And when it comes to land use, I mean, this is an example in the UK. You're saying that whether it's solar or wind, it just uses more land.
It uses much more land. As you can see, the Hinkley power plant, the highly debated power plant project in the UK, it's actually that size here. It's basically your little finger's tip, the size. And if you use solar panels, of course you can use the roofs, etc. That uses like 250 times more space. And then wind is even worse because you have minimal distance between the wind power plants, and that means 500 times more land used, and that doesn't even provide you the continuous 24/7 power you actually need in a country like the Philippines. So you still have to have backup power, which usually in the States is now gas, natural gas, in the UK as well. And then in Germany, the Energiewende, which is always touted as the one example, actually still uses coal power. They can't reduce coal power because they need to fill the gaps of the intermittency of renewable energy.
Now, one of the concerns is, you know, you have nuclear power that could be clean. It uses uranium, but uranium is also finite. I mean, the supply of uranium is not limitless.
That's true,
so what
basically
do you do?
for all resources.
Yes.
Now, if you have uranium like the ones which is now stored safely and would use that 270,000 metric tons, which was all generated in the States, that would be enough to power the world for 72 years. So if you would actually use these new modern power plants, which will go online hopefully by end of the 2020s, 2030s,
so they've collected,
then you can use that.
But they've collected uranium that's good for 76 years?
It's the burnt fuel, which you actually have to store controllably. As you say, it's very safe. And it's in intermediary storage before it goes to the terminal storage. Actually, the terminal storage is not really needed in that way anymore, because we'll recycle this, because it's radioactive, because it's full of energy.
I see. Okay. Now, high cost. I mean, one of the issues is the nuclear business, they say, I mean, let waste cool for a considerable length of time. Is this a genuine concern?
That's important. No, it's not a concern. That's the way you do it. You let it in these water pools for 5 to 10 years. And the pools are actually very good shield to cause any harm.
What about the safety? I mean, look at that. In Hinkley, this is under protest. So, I mean, one of the issues is anywhere in the world, it's a high target for militants and protesters.
Actually, that's what people think. That's a common sort of myth. It's a myth. Because if you really want to harm a country, then you probably better target a football stadium or let's say an area or an event where you actually see the concentration of people you want to hit the country, like it happened in Paris. A nuclear power plant can't explode, it's not a bomb. and they have very thick walls.
Yeah, so
you
it
need
can't
to
explode.
really target
Yeah.
that they're actually very, very safely built.
Yeah. All right, Urs, how many days are you in the Philippines? And I think you should explain. You are not a lobbyist. You are not with the power sector. You are clearly an advocate.
Absolutely. Energy for Humanity is industry independent, is privately sourced, and not affiliated to any of the companies or power companies or nuclear technology companies.
Are you planning to meet with any of the senators, any of the officials in the Philippines?
I would love to meet. I would love to meet and have an open exchange and help to open minds and maybe just also have a critical debate. I'm happy to meet with any opponents or people considering it and just feeling insecure, how to proceed, how to do. We definitely, I would suggest you need to at least elaborate a roadmap how to build and how to achieve a clean and cheap Philippine energy future.
And you believe, you know, the Philippines has one of the strictest, clean air laws. The Clean Air Act in the Philippines has been lauded by no less than the United Nations. Would you say that nuclear energy will not go against the Clean Air Act?
Absolutely not.
No.
It will actually help.
Yeah.
So the air out here is, I'm coming from Switzerland. We have to clear air from the Alps, and we have a power mix which is 40% nuclear, almost 60% hydropower, and this was the reason why we didn't build in the 60s the coal power plants. We went for nuclear. We combined it with pump storage from hydro, and we have the perfect mix.
Yeah.
Now, if you follow politics now, we have a bit of a debate. We have a referendum going, a people's initiative, which actually wants to immediately exit nuclear energy. It would be the wrong way around. It doesn't follow global trends.
Yes, okay. All right, last words. Clearly in the Philippines, the challenge is in the mind.
The challenge is in the mind.
It's in the mind.
And the challenge, I think it's a challenge you have to meet and to debate and to, at the end, come up with a proper solution.
What would be a good energy mix for the Philippines?
I would say it's a mix where you look at the complete energy mix, not just electricity, but first start with electricity, reduce coal power as much as you can, start implementing nuclear power plants as soon as you can. If that's going to be bought down or not is a question, but that one could probably run by early 20s if you start now.
Yeah.
And then you also need the regulation in place, but mid-20s you should already have third generations in place, because in China they build nuclear power plants below 5 years.
Wow.
And they scale, so they go out now. They have already like 35 reactors online, and every month there's a new reactor going online. South Korea, same track record. They built 8 gigawatt for the United Arab Emirates in rocket speed.
So clearly it's the Philippines. Yeah. Okay. All right. On that note, Urs Bolt, thank you for coming to Headstart. Welcome to the Philippines.
Thank you, Karen.
Replay of this interview is at 3:30 p.m. this afternoon. It's also uploaded on iwanttv.com.ph. I'm Karen Davila. Thank you for watching. That's Headstart today. Up next is Market Edge.